This is literally the worst violin I've ever heard. Are you sure you know how to play? 11-year-old Sienna Hartwell's voice dripped with condescension as she listened to her new music teacher play a simple scale on what appeared to be a student-grade violin. The teacher, a man in his 60s with gentle eyes and weathered hands, smiled patiently and set down the instrument. I know it's not the finest violin, Sienna, but sometimes it's good to practice on simpler instruments. Shall we begin? Your lesson? Sienna rolled her eyes. Can we? Or are you going to waste more of my time with that cheap violin? My last teacher played a Stradivarius. Or at least, that's what she said. She probably lied too. The teacher's name was David Rosenberg, and he'd been teaching music at the community center for 3 months. He'd appeared seemingly out of nowhere, offering his services for minimal pay, working with students who couldn't afford private lessons. He dressed simply, drove an old car, and seemed grateful for the opportunity to teach. What Sienna didn't know was that David Rosenberg had once been David Rosenberg, first-chair violin at the New York Philharmonic, soloist who'd performed at Carnegie Hall over 200 times, recipient of 3 Grammy Awards, and owner of an actual Stradivarius worth $12 million. He'd retired from public performance 2 years ago after his wife's death, looking for meaning beyond concert halls and standing ovations. Teaching at a Salais community center, working with students who truly wanted to learn, had given him that meaning, until Sienna Hartwell arrived. My mom says I have to take lessons here because my last teacher was too expensive, Sienna announced, examining her perfectly manicured nails. But honestly, looking at this place and looking at you, I don't think you can teach me anything I don't already know. Perhaps you're right, David said mildly. Why don't you play something for me? Show me what you've learned. Sienna pulled out her violin, an expensive instrument her parents had bought her for her 10th birthday, and played a simplified version of a Mozart concerto. She played competently, hitting most of the notes, but with no feeling, no soul, no understanding of the music. When she finished, she smiled smugly. See? I'm already basically professional. I don't know why my mom insists I need more lessons. David nodded thoughtfully. You have good technical skills. But tell me, what is Mozart trying to express in that piece? Express? It's just notes. You play them. People clap. Done. Music is far more than just notes, Sienna. It's emotion, storytelling, the composer's soul translated into sound. You played the notes correctly, but you didn't play the music, Sienna scoffed. Whatever. That's the kind of pretentious thing broke music teachers say when they can't actually play. If you were any good, you'd be teaching at a real music school, not some community center. Perhaps. Or perhaps, I'm here because this is where I'm needed most. Or because nobody else would hire you. Sienna looked around the small practice room with obvious disdain. I mean, look at this place. The walls are peeling, that piano is out of tune, and I bet none of your students have any real talent. A young boy who'd been waiting for his lesson in the hallway overheard this and looked crushed. His name was Marcus. He was 8 years old, and he came from a family that could barely afford the community center's subsidized lessons. He'd been thrilled to study with Mr. Rosenberg. David saw Marcus's face and felt anger rise for the first time in months. Sienna, I think we need to have a conversation about respect. I don't need lessons about respect from someone who probably makes minimum wage. My dad's a neurosurgeon. My mom's a lawyer. They're important. You're just this. She gestured dismissively at it. I see. And your parents' success makes you better than everyone else? It makes me better than people who end up teaching at community centers, yeah. David stood up slowly. Young lady, I've taught hundreds of students over my career. Some became professionals. Others just played for joy. But every single one of them understood that music requires humility, dedication, and respect. You have none of those qualities. Good. Then I don't have to come back here. Sienna started packing up her violin. Wait, David said quietly. Before you go, I want you to hear something. He picked up the cheap violin Sienna had mocked and began to play. But this wasn't a simple scale. This was Paganini's Caprice No. 24, one of the most technically demanding pieces in violin repertoire, and David played it flawlessly. Sienna froze, her mouth falling open. The music filled the small room, spilled into the hallway where other students stopped to listen. David's fingers flew across the strings with impossible speed and precision, his bow creating sounds that seemed impossible from such a basic instrument. When he finished, the hallway erupted in applause. Students and parents who'd gathered to listen stood amazed. That was... How did you... Sienna couldn't form a complete sentence. That was Paganini. Notoriously difficult. I learned it when I was 16, studying at Juilliard. You went to Juilliard? I did. First in my class. Then I spent 40 years performing at the world's greatest concert halls. Please, tell me again how I don't know how to play. Sienna's face flushed red. If you're so good, why are you teaching here? Before David could answer, a woman's voice called from the doorway. Because he wants to be. David, I thought I might find you here. An elegant woman in her 50s entered, carrying a violin case. She was Elena Martinez, current concertmaster of the New York Philharmonic and one of the most respected violinists in the world. Elena, David greeted her warmly. What brings you here? You do, obviously. You disappeared from the music world 2 years ago and nobody's heard from you. Some of us were getting worried. She noticed Sienna staring. Who's your student? This is Sienna. She was just explaining how cheap instruments and community center teachers couldn't possibly teach her anything. Elena raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Sienna, do you know who this man is? He said he went to Juilliard. He's David Rosenberg, 3-time Grammy winner, first chair of the Philharmonic for 20 years, the finest violinist of his generation. When I was your age, I had posters of him on my wall. I studied his recordings for hours trying to learn his technique. And you just called him a broke teacher at a cheap community center. Sienna felt like the floor was tilting. That's not possible. David Rosenberg is famous. He plays at Carnegie Hall. He owns a Stradivarius. This guy drives a Toyota and teaches at a community center. I am David Rosenberg, David said quietly. And I do own a Stradivarius. Several, actually. But after my wife died, performing lost its meaning. Playing for thousands of people who'd never met me, who didn't actually care about the music beyond the spectacle. It felt empty. He gestured to the hallway where students still lingered. But here, teaching Marcus how to hold a bow properly, watching Sarah finally master a piece she's been working on for months, helping kids who'd never have access to quality music education otherwise, that matters. That has meaning. Elena smiled. Which is exactly what I told everyone when they asked where you'd gone. But David, the Philharmonic's anniversary concert is next month. We want you to perform. One last time. I'm retired, Elena. I know. But this isn't for the critics or the society crowd. It's for the students. We're raising money for music education programs. Programs like this community center. Come play one piece. Show these kids what's possible. David considered, then looked at Sienna. Only if I can. Bring some of my students, including this young lady. Sienna's eyes widened. Me? Why would you want me there after what I said? Because you need to learn something important. That success isn't about money or status. It's about passion, dedication, and using your gifts to lift others up. 2 weeks later, Sienna found herself backstage at Carnegie Hall, surrounded by professional musicians preparing for the concert. She'd never felt more out of place or more humbled. Marcus was there too, along with several other community center students. They were all thrilled, nervous, completely overwhelmed. Mr. Rosenberg, Marcus asked David, are you really going to play in front of all these people? I am. And I want you all to watch carefully. Not because I'm showing off, but because I want you to see what's possible when you dedicate yourself to something you love. When David took the stage, the audience of over 2,000 people rose in standing ovation before he'd played a single note. Sienna watched from the wings, understanding finally who she'd been mocking. David played Chausson's poem, a piece his late wife had loved. He played it with such emotion, such depth of feeling, that several audience members were crying by the end. The standing ovation lasted nearly 10 minutes. Backstage afterward, Sienna approached David hesitantly. Mr. Rosenberg, I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I said horrible things about you and I was completely wrong. David nodded. You were. But you're young. The question is whether you'll learn from this. I want to. I want to learn from you. Really learn. Not just the notes, but the meaning, the passion, everything I've been missing. Then you'll need to make some changes. First, you'll apologize to every student at the community center who heard you disparage their teacher and their school. Second, you'll treat every person you meet with respect, regardless of their circumstances. And third, you'll practice not to show off, but to honor the music. I will. I promise. Over the next year, Sienna transformed. She practiced with dedication, not arrogance. She helped younger students instead of looking down on them. She learned that technical skill meant nothing without soul. David noticed the change. You're improving, Sienna. Not just your playing, but your understanding of what music really is. You taught me that. You and everyone at the community center. I was so focused on being better than everyone that I forgot to actually be better. For the center's end-of-year recital, David arranged something special. He'd play a duet with one student of his choosing. He chose Sienna. Me? But Marcus is more talented, and Sarah works harder. This isn't about talent or hard work. It's about growth. You've changed more than anyone I've taught this year. You've learned humility. That deserves recognition. The duet was simple. Nothing like the complex pieces David had performed at Carnegie Hall. But Sienna played it with more feeling than she'd ever brought to music before. She understood finally that music wasn't about showing off. It was about connection, emotion, sharing something beautiful with others. After the recital, Sienna's parents approached David. Mr. Rosenberg, we had no idea who you were when we enrolled Sienna here. We thought you were just a community teacher. I am just a community teacher, David said with a smile. That's exactly what I want to be. Mr. Hartwell looked embarrassed. Sienna told us what she said to you. We're horrified. We've raised her to value success, but we've clearly failed to teach her to value people. You haven't failed. She's learning. Growth is a process. 3 years later, when Sienna applied to music conservatories, David wrote her recommendation letter. It didn't focus on her technical skills, which were now quite good. Instead, it talked about her transformation from an arrogant child to a thoughtful musician who understood that music was about service, not status. She was accepted to Juilliard, David's alma mater. On her first day, she was assigned to practice rooms in the same building where David had studied 50 years earlier. On the wall was a photo of famous alumni, and there was David Rosenberg, young and talented, standing with his first Stradivarius. Sienna's roommate noticed her staring at the photo. That's David Rosenberg, legend. My teacher used to study his recordings. Whatever happened to him? Sienna smiled. He's teaching at a community center helping kids who can't afford fancy lessons, and he's the best teacher in the world. Wait, you studied with him? I did. And he taught me that the quality of a teacher has nothing to do with where they teach. It has everything to do with whether they help you become better than you were. Years later, after graduating and beginning her own career, Sienna returned to the community center. David was still there, still teaching, still transforming lives, one student at a time. Mr. Rosenberg, I got my first professional position, principal second violin with the Boston Symphony. I heard, congratulations. I want to give back. I want to teach here, like you do. Not for money or recognition. Because this is where it matters. David smiled. Then you've truly learned the lesson. Music isn't about personal glory. It's about what you give to others. Together, they taught at the community center. The famous virtuoso and his former bratty student, now. Both dedicated to passing on not just technique but values. Humility. Service. Understanding that true greatness is measured by how you lift others up, not how high you climb yourself. And sometimes, late at night when the center was quiet, David would take out his actual Stradivarius and play. Not for audiences or accolades, but for the pure joy of music. And Sienna would listen, remembering the day she'd mocked a cheap violin, and learned that the most valuable things in life often come in the humblest packages.